November 18th, regular meeting of the Sonoma City Council. And can we get a volunteer to do the Pledge of Allegiance? Raise your hand if you know it. No one? Nobody knows it? Norma Barnett, she knows it.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Whew, we're still Americans. All right. Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Here.
Councilmember Cook.
Here.
Councilmember Hundley.
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Present.
Mayor Harrington.
Present.
Thank you.
And there's no report on closed session. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Agrimonti. Aye. Councilmember Cook.
Here.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, on to public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone, and begin by stating and spelling your name and giving your address. Thank you. Hi, Terry.
Yes, hi, good evening, Mayor Harrington, City Council members, staff, members of the public. My name is Terry Shore, T-E-R-I-S-H-O-R-E. I am the Regional Director for Greenbelt Alliance. I live at 515 Hopkins Street in Sonoma. So I'm here to give you a couple of quick updates and also make an ask. First, I wanted to let you know that Greenbelt Alliance is pleased to report that the City of Rohnert Park recently renewed its existing urban growth boundary for another 20 years, a bit ahead of schedule, with a 90% vote of the people of the City of Rohnert Park in a special election this November. It was unanimously supported by the City Council and put on the ballot by the City Council. And it had a number of endorsers, which helped us pass it by 90%. Greenbelt Alliance, of course, Sierra Club, Sonoma County Conservation Action, the Sonoma County Democratic Party, the Rohnert Park Democratic Club, and the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria. So, in other wins on this front, Greenbelt Alliance is also pleased to report that voters defeated by 70% a measure to expand the urban limit line out in Brentwood and Contra Costa County by 70%. And similar to Rohnert Park, we had a small kind of scrappy grassroots campaign, but in this case there was a huge developer initiated ballot measure that the voters soundly defeated. So what this tells us, and there have been other wins around the Bay Area and around the state, is that the voters in the Bay Area continue to have overwhelming support for the protection of greenbelts and focusing new growth in existing towns and cities. That goes all the way up to the governor and the state legislature of California that continue to advance climate policies to provide for homes and neighborhoods inside existing towns and cities. So my ask is to please put the urban growth boundary on a city council agenda very soon. I know you've been trying to put it on an agenda for both the Planning Commission and the City Council, but due to various wildfires, evacuations, outages, and other things, I know you've been delayed. So I urge you to please get the process going quickly by the end of the year. Put it on the City Council agenda so that we can ensure a robust public discussion. Renewing the UGB is a solution for preventing climate change emissions. It's a solution for a diverse community, and it's a solution for how the city is able to continue to fund and provide water, roads, police, and fire response. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello. This is my first time. Be gentle. I'm Carmen Buffington, representing the Sonoma Valley Chamber of Commerce at 651 Broadway. I am here on behalf of my boss, Mark Bodenhammer, who has spent his day in Sacramento giving feedback on how PG&E power outages have affected small business. He just got out of the meetings about 30 minutes ago and is now on his way home. He wanted me to come here and mention a couple of events that we have coming up, and he also wanted to make sure that you all know that the Chamber of Commerce, the Board of Directors, the employees, the members all appreciate how much you guys have been supporting the programming for small business and the programming that the Chamber has to support small business. So we really appreciate what the council has done on behalf of business in our community. So thank you. First of all, the December Art Walk is Thursday, December 5th, during which we are having the holiday window decorating contest again like we did last year. For the businesses in and around the plaza, we would love to have someone from City Council judge again. I'm sure Mark will be reaching out regarding this if he hasn't already. And also, Small Business Saturday is November 30th. We will be at Basque from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. giving out free coffee and miscellaneous shopping swag. This event kicks off our I Shopped Small in Sonoma Valley campaign, which we're doing again. This campaign runs from November 30th, the kickoff, till December 31st. We are giving away $500 in cash to one lucky winner. The person who won last year was so happy. To enter, all one has to do is shop at a local participating business, get the I Shopped Local sticker, and then snap a picture of the sticker and tag the business in the chamber and use our hashtag #ShopSmallSonoma. Shop Small.
Oh, cute.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Great job. Thank you. Hope to see you again.
Hi, I'm Laura, 527 Mariano Drive, Sonoma, California. I'm here to say what I have on my paper. Please consider allowing people to live in tiny houses on wheels, vans, and RVs in the city of Sonoma when they are parked in driveways or anywhere on homeowners' property. This would help people have somewhere to live on their property when they are rebuilding after a fire. This would help people in Sonoma to house people from other areas who had to be evacuated due to a fire. This could, in some cases, help people to live in a space with power during power outages by using their vehicle's battery energy. This would help people be able to house their family members, young adults, and elders while allowing them to have some independence at the same time. This would help people be able to engage in van life, tiny living, and minimalism, as well as potentially even help people in reducing their environmental impact. If individual homeowners or landlords did not want this for their property, they could simply not participate, and they could also come together with their neighbors to mutually agree that they will not be allowing this on their individual street. In addition, there could be guidelines to follow for people who engage in this activity as far as how utility use, plumbing, water usage, and so on are operated. I think that for the reasons of our current climate emergency, wealth inequality, and high rents in Sonoma, that it is now time to allow people to live in tiny houses, vans, and RVs that are parked in homeowner driveways and or anywhere on homeowners' property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gita Bugelmans, and if I spell it, I'll take up my whole 3 minutes. I live at 1405 Denmark Street in Sonoma. I'm a nurse, and I work in this community. Because of my work, I know that there are those in our neighborhood that depend on electric medical equipment, oxygen concentrators for breathing, refrigerated medication needed to stay well. This is when we don't have electricity. There are those in our community that need help obtaining food and preparing meals. There are those in our community that will fall or injure themselves because the lights are out and they can't see well. There are many in our community that will feel grateful and reassured with a knock on the door from a neighbor that is caring about them. The list goes on. I can tell you from personal experience that there was one senior in our community who has chronic respiratory problems, which got worse from the smoke, wasn't able to call the doctor because she didn't have a phone, and continued to get more and more anxious, would just add to her respiratory problems, and she's still in the hospital today. There are other people that I can cite as examples, but again, I don't have enough time. So I propose a neighborhood care patrol. It's really a simple concept. We map out neighborhoods. We find people willing to be neighborhood leaders. With assistance, these leaders recruit volunteers. These volunteers go door to door in their neighborhoods in an emergency. They have a checkoff list and find people that are in need of help. These people are then brought to the attention of the neighborhood captains, who then report to the fire department or the police department or whoever is the appropriate person or agency. Thanks. Oops. Uh-oh. Okay, so there will be documentation and follow-up so we know that these people in need will be helped. I know some neighborhoods do this already. I would like to spearhead, under the authority of the City of Sonoma, an organized neighborhood response team. There is nothing like it presently in our community. Perhaps we would be able to involve the high school students that are interested in participating as their senior project to help build awareness and future civic-minded citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. And since I think you're new to public comment, I just want to say we can't respond to things that aren't on our agenda, but we can receive them and reach out to you later and follow up on it.
Okay, thank you. I hope
Thanks
you
for
do.
coming.
It needs to be done.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one come forward, I will, oh, sorry.
I said the pledge.
Seeing our most patriotic member of the audience come forward.
That's right, you can't stop me. Okay, my name is Norma Barnett, and I'm the case manager at SOS, the Haven, the homeless shelter in town. I have a degree, I'm an MSW, and have a license in clinical social work. And in the course of my 40 years of experience, I've worked with 4 nonprofit agencies who are small and who face the same kind of problems that the current SOS shelter does. So I have a lot of experience to speak from. First of all, what I want to say, this doesn't apply to every agency that I've worked in, but one of the things I want to say is sometimes the homeless people are referred to as those people. Those people are our people. We have been able to determine that even though we can't prove that every single person has lived in Sonoma and is a Sonoma resident, we have been able to determine that probably about 2/3 of the people who live in, who use the services of the shelter are from the city of Sonoma. And how do we know that? Well, obviously, we don't know it just by them telling us that. But if you sit down and talk to somebody for a half an hour or an hour, you know where they come from. They tell you what school they went to. They tell you where their parents live. You get to know what the population is and where they're from. And that's very important to keep in mind. The second thing I want to say at this point is that treating people, and I don't know what the next portion of the discussion is going to be about homelessness and the shelter, but I do want to say that treating people well will help people feel better, and they become more a part of the community, and they become more cooperative, and they behave better. So even though there's a sense that what people need is toughness and strictness and even punitiveness for being homeless and for some of the behavior that comes from homelessness, the fact is they do much better if you
take time to listen to them, take time to talk to them, treat them with respect, and also give them credit for what they do well. And so I would urge you to keep that in mind when we discuss this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one come forward, I will close public comment. Are there any meeting dedications?
I have a meeting dedication. I'd like to dedicate this evening to Dominic Chiaramoni, who passed away, 93-year-old native of San Francisco. Now, of course, prior to his death, lived here in Sonoma. World War II veteran, retired San Francisco sheriff, and he also was a Hall of Fame legend. Lefty O'Doul asked Dominic to play for the San Francisco Seals after he returned from the Navy, but Dominic chose a family life over baseball. And he actually says he's always shocked that Hollywood never considered him because he was such a handsome guy. So, and they said Dom lived in his own way, and it was Dom's way. And I'd like to also tell you at Scandia, he has a table dedicated to him there in the Scandia Bakery. He leaves behind his wife Donna, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I think he was someone who was a very important part of the city of Sonoma, like many people. So my husband worked with his son, his son is now deceased. But Dominic was a pretty unbelievable guy. So I'd just like to dedicate this evening to him. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. We don't have any presentations this evening, so on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, the council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Are there any council members who want to pull an item or have any comment on this matter? No? I'll take it out to the public. Any members of the public want to comment on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back for a motion.
So doesn't seem like there's a lot of excitement about this. So I will move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Can we get a roll call with enthusiasm?
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Absolutely.
Mayor Harrington.
You betcha.
Thank you. The motion carries
That was
unanimously.
great. There is no public hearing tonight, and on to the regular calendar of the city council. Consider item 6.1. Consideration, discussion, and possible action to A, approve the resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma authorizing the city manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Sonoma Overnight Support, SOS, for the implementation and operation of a safe parking program in the police department parking lot at 175 First Street West, and B, approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma establishing parking restrictions in public parking lots. City Manager Kathy Capriola.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Harrington, members of the council and the public. So just a brief update of what we're asking council to do tonight and how we got here. Council is well aware we have a homeless ad hoc made up of Councilmember Agrimonti and Councilmember Hundley, been working on a variety of homeless issues. And one of these items that happened some time ago was a first pilot project of a safe parking. And that was done in early 2017. And at that point, there was not enough participation. So after 3 months, it was stopped. Recently, what's occurred is that the parking lot right out here at in the police department, we have seen in the past few months a larger number of folks parking and homeless sleeping in their cars in the parking lot, but that is as in kind of unregulated environment. And so in response to that, the ad hoc committee met with the executive director of the SOS, Kathy King and her team, and had some conversations, and there was support to look at bringing back a safe parking, what I'll call for shorthand 2.0, and looking at another opportunity at a different time. And so there was a neighborhood meeting that was well attended. There was a mix of views, some support, some questions, and some concerns. And then a number of those concerns were drafted into a concept of a new safe parking program to be looked at here in the parking lot. So what we came to council on October 21st, and we had agreement from this council to move forward and bring back a safe parking program. So what is in front of you now are the implementation actions. So there basically are two resolutions that we're asking council to support. The first one basically authorizes me to enter into a memorandum of understanding with SOS to create a safe parking program with a series of rules and regulations. There's a version of this that was in the public agenda with some track changes because we had some version issues, but that's in front of you. And then there was also some minor edits from our city attorney today that are in the handwritten in the printed copy in front of you too in yellow. I don't think there's anything of major policy concern there. I would call it more just kind of refining and clarifying. And then the second item would be another resolution where basically the council would be establishing parking restrictions in our parking lots to not allow overnight parking in 3 of our parking lots except by permit. And the permit basically is what gets created by creating the safe parking program. So that is the action in front of you. Erica Jacobs, who's our senior management analyst, has been working with me on this and can answer questions. And then I also see Officer Steve Luchetti outside is here representing the police department, and he has been assigned to be the point police officer to work directly with SOS, and appreciate Officer Luchetti's time and effort. And so I know we have Kathy King from Sonoma Overnight Support here, if the council would like to hear any comments from her, and then I would ask you that you take public comment or any questions before. So with that, that would be the end of the staff presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there council questions?
Well, I know that this is, no question. So I just want to know, I spoke with our city manager today, and I think there were some iterations of this that went around and started this way, and so you feel comfortable that we're where we should be, and there are okay, because that was something that, I did a lot of reading today, and I have to be reminded that there's 2 resolutions. One is for the parking program, and what is, I don't see.
And the other resolution basically, because right now none of our parking lots have any time parking. You could come to our parking lot and you could park for 24 hours in the parking lot. Some cities have no overnight parking in their parking lots, but that's never been put in place here. So part of what we're doing is a 2-step. We're saying we're authorizing a safe parking program in the police parking lot, and there are parameters within the safe parking. I think it's people can arrive at 10 o'clock, leave at 9 a.m. actually, and then at 9 a.m. they can stay for services at the Haven. But by 1 o'clock, those vehicles in the safe parking program would need to leave. There will be up to 10 spaces. They would be designated more in the middle or towards the Haven side in terms of, and not close to the ball field side. So we'll have some dedicated spaces that will be outlined as well. So the part of this then is this program basically creates a permit. Each car will have a permit, and the only way you can then park overnight in the city parking lot is with a permit. And so with them, we're clarifying that there's not overnight parking in 3 other kind of the city's parking lots.
Councilmember Hundley?
So is that overnight parking period, or overnight parking with a person in the car?
Well, I think it's more overnight parking period. And again, this would be by enforcement or by complaint per se is what would be occurring. But the plan was to say no overnight, maybe no overnight, no camping parking. And that was the intention, but definitely putting some no overnight parking.
So would this include a car if somebody was on the plaza and they had too much to drink and they took a taxi home and their car was parked in a parking lot overnight?
It would, though. I purposely one of the city's parking lots is the parking lot behind the Sebastiani, and I did not include this in the overnight because there are people stay at the movie theaters using that restaurant. So this is really depot, and I think it's depot. It's the police department. There's one other, and behind City Hall.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Harvey, Vice Mayor.
So if you do leave your car back there overnight, it's towed or is it fined or?
I think there would be first kind of a, could be a warning notice and then a ticket. I think if we saw a perpetual pattern, it would be, then we would start more active enforcement. But that's, again, we're not, it's part of just doing some regulations on these lots.
And then for Mr. Lucetti, who's outside, if it would be possible, I'd love to hear just kind of about what the police department's relationship is with SOS and how that relationship works.
He appears.
And he is. Here he is.
So Officer Lucetti, can you come on up to the microphone and Vice Mayor Harvey?
Like magic.
Welcome.
Welcome.
I'm prepared to speak.
You're going to be all right. Welcome. So I just would like if you could speak a little bit about the relationship between the police department and the SOS and how the relationship works and what you see your role as. What is the role of the police department in this safe parking situation?
Basically, the role that we have is just to work with the Haven and be kind of like a liaison to monitor and facilitate those individuals that are using the facility there, and respond to calls if needed, whether it be from the facility at the Haven or citizens at the park, and just kind of, track it and make sure that everyone's safe and following the rules and stuff like that.
I have a question. So in terms, because our police station is closed at night, and then you're based out of the Valley substation. Correct?
No.
Oh, okay.
We're here all the time. So there's Valley substation deputies, and then there's Sonoma police officers that are here
At night?
At night, yes.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll scratch that because I was going to say, how often are you in the parking lot?
Yeah. Well, I work till
Not you personally,
yeah,
but
I work till midnight. I try to go by a couple times a shift before midnight, and then there's the graveyard deputies. There's 2 of them, and they'll make passing checks as needed.
okay.
And then part of the rules and the requirements within this program is Sonoma Overnight Support is required to have a security firm company that will be going through at least 4 times a night and to monitor as well.
Thanks. Councilmember Hundley.
And I assume the answer is yes, but with the change to these parking lots, that there's going to be clear signage.
Yeah, there'll be signage that would be posted as well.
Have we had anybody sleeping in any other parking lot besides the SOS or the police department parking lot?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. So if council wanted to make it strictly the police, part of what we were thinking was just, having kind of a broader policy overlay on this.
Councilmember Cook?
Sorry.
Yeah, I guess this question's probably for Nancy King. Where is the closest safe parking from Sonoma now?
There aren't any.
So in the Springs area and all that, but you would still welcome individuals from the Springs area?
Can I speak to the?
Yes.
So can I just ask you to speak in the mic? Yeah.
The criteria is women and children.
Wait, because people can't hear you for the, and also for the recording of this, we don't have minutes. We have action minutes, so it's helpful to have everything.
To answer your question, Kathy King here. People, I just want to go backtrack. The priority is women and children, seniors, citizens who live in Sonoma and Sonoma Valley. That would be our priority to take people in. And to answer the question before that, we did a sampling of 20 people and asked them where they park. And they park here, they park in the Safeway lot, they park in the Veterans Hall, and they also park behind Sebastiani's. And so people, in October, there were 36 people living in their cars. That's up from June of 24 people. There's multiple people living in their cars. So it's mom, dad, and, or mom, dad, someone, and then someone else. So it's not just one car, there's people and pets in cars. So you're talking about 40 people that are sleeping out in Sonoma somewhere. So those are the parking lots that we know that people are going to.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Can I just say that we have a really good relationship? Back me up here, Steve. A really good relationship with the police department, and we work in tandem. And we communicate with the police chief, with Deputy Steve if there's a problem. And we're really blessed to have them work with our staff and work with the homeless community, which the police treat with such respect. So we're really grateful to have that kind of relationship. And we're hoping that we can start December 1st because our winter shelter opens on that night, and we are going to open up the Haven for evening meals, 120 nights of evening meals. And I'd hate to serve the people inside that are coming in for the winter shelter and leave people out in their cars while people come in and eat dinner. And so that's what we want to offer as an extra, besides the porta potty, extra garbage cans, and the security company that will drive through and then will report after midnight, whatever time, 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. We're going to figure out times that Deputy Steve says that would, be most effective. And then they will report to the police if there's anything happening, or then they would report to SOS too. So that's what we're going to do to make sure that things run smoothly.
So I'm a little confused because it's my understanding that the winter shelter is not here at SOS but at a church. So I don't understand how the
People come
parking lot and the church work together.
They come at 5 o'clock and they gather under if it's raining, kind of not a tent but a warming thing. And then we feed them dinner at 6 o'clock.
But where?
At the Haven.
Oh, at the Haven.
Yes, and we've been doing that for 5 years. So
okay.
everybody gets dinner at the Haven, and then Vern's taxi van picks everyone up at 7 o'clock.
I see.
And then they transport them over to Sonoma Alliance Church. They stay there from 7 o'clock. There's no in and out. No one can drive their car there because we want to respect the neighbors. So they can go to, they'll go there, stay inside, and then in the morning, the van will pick them up. They will come back for day services to the Haven.
I see. Okay.
And the limit is 15 there.
The limit for the overnight shelter is 15.
15.
15.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Harvey?
So broadly around the city of Sonoma, what are the policies for people sleeping in their cars on their street, in front of their house, things like that? Is that permissible? Is that prohibited?
So my understanding, this is part of, we are not able to move people along. They can sleep in their cars, they can, and this is, so it's definitely, trying to find a safe place where people can, and people do park and they move around. Steve, is there anything?
We're not able to move people. There's a Supreme Court case, right, where we're not able to move people along, but by creating parking policies that apply to everybody. Is that kind of the thing? So it's like, because you can park your car overnight in front of your house, obviously, then anybody can park there because it's a public street. But if we have a parking policy for a specific parking lot that says no overnight parking except by permit, now those rules apply to everybody and we can move people along?
I thought maybe Jeff can address this question. So with regard, I thought it was a Ninth Circuit ruling, but there was one ruling that said if you didn't have somewhere that people could go, you couldn't move them along. And the second question is, can you have a law that targets one group, I think is the question.
You can have a law that targets one group. It
And
depends on what kind of law it is.
So the question is, in this case, if you said, we are not allowing homeless people to sleep in this parking lot, could you have a law like that? Not that you want to. This is to understand. Do you need to make a law that covers all people sleeping in cars under all circumstances, or can you have a law that addresses a specific concern?
Well, the concern here is people sleeping in the car whether you're homeless or not, is my understanding. I think there's a concern if somebody's been drinking too much at a restaurant, they decide to sleep it off in a parking lot. That's a concern to the city as much as it is a homeless family that's living there. So you treat them equally.
And is that required?
And it's certainly the safest course to take, obviously.
And then the second question, just to reiterate what the law is about moving homeless people if you don't have a shelter for them.
You're right when you characterize it. If there's not another place for them to go, you cannot move them along. You can't pick them up for loitering or vagrancy.
Thanks.
So
And
that's
Councilmember
camping
Agrimonti
in
has a
public
question.
space.
I have some questions. The cost the cost, obviously, it's mounting. You have security. You have your system of, you have a social worker who's questioning people, obviously. There's money involved with that. A lot of other different things. What are the other expenses you're going to incur?
So security company costs $1,000 a month. Porta potty cleaned professionally twice a week, and then by our staff. It's checked every day. That's $287. It's the deluxe, by the way. It's got a sink and a light. And then the extra garbage cans, because we agreed with Fred from Field of Dreams that we would put our garbage cans out there and we would collect them once a week. Norma will be the staff person along with Elena Aliotto will do the intake. So the amount of time it takes to intake people and go through. Or also, the other additional thing is that once people are signed up, they're then required to sign up to the other services we have at SOS with Interface Shelter Network to do coordinated entry and rapid rehousing, with share housing, and with whole person care. So those are the three things that they need to sign up for to get additional services and move on and get help. So it's gonna be an additional help to say to the people, come on in, Norma will vet you. We're also getting the names of their pets and their, because people know the dog park people know people by their pets. So if there's a problem, we need to know the pet's name. So that's critical. And what kind of pet? Or some people have more than one pet living in the car with them. So we want to monitor that. Does that answer your question? So $2,000 a month, and the money there's no money from the county, there's no money from the city, and we're gonna raise that ourselves because the board is committed to this, to doing this.
Councilmember Hundley?
Yeah, I just had one other question. I know about two organizations you mentioned. The third, I can't find it in my notes. I'm not familiar with home care or home at
It's
what?
called whole person care. It's a program run by the county, and they have a staff person that comes in every Friday and signs people up so they can, if they have, they present, and Norma can correct me if they're wrong, if they can check all the boxes that they need help because they have some mental instabilities, they can then get moved into a program. And so we've been doing that with the county, no costs. We're not charging them to be there, but they are filling out, they're getting people to move on if they can move into housing that's for people that have some mental issues. And so there's three other entities working out of the Haven.
I'm sorry, so that's real? I mean, in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego, I think Scott Wiener has had a bill that was passed, I think it was SB 4, about conservatorship.
No, it's not
That's not-
conservatorship. There's a certain list that the county, if someone answers questions, checks all the boxes, then they can get help through mental, voluntary. It's voluntary.
Voluntary.
They can check all the boxes and at the end say, I don't want to do it. But if they can get some housing or they can get some services, then whole person care will provide that.
Oh, I see. And that's through the county?
Through the county.
All right,
And then
thank you.
It was out of the health center, but they're not doing it right now, but they may later, so we decided to take them in because they needed a place to be.
Thank you.
I would just add to that under the LPS Conservatorship Act, that the county actually has an affirmative duty to conserve people that have mental health or are gravely disabled by alcohol. It's already written. They don't do it because they're not funded for it, but the public guardian already exists. They already have complete authority to do a 1-year conservatorship to get people the mental health services that they require. I'm a probate attorney. I do conservatorships all the time, and if the county wanted to, they could do them right now.
They won't because of, obviously,
But they
funding.
won't because of funding.
And the Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco, this is sort of a pilot program. It's not, they're just gonna experiment and see how that works. So I don't know, I'd like to, keep on top of that to find out what's happening.
Yeah. Councilmember Hundley?
So what does the private security bring that say the police doesn't do?
Well, the police, like say, Deputy Steve might get called out on a, call, but it will bring consistency to, driving through the parking lot at 2:00 in the morning and checking. They'll also check the permits, make sure that a car has a permit on it, and then they will also make sure that there's nothing's happening. And really, to have a staff person do that is, to sleep and then get up and walk around the area, it's too costly. So this security company does that for a living. They check the premises, they make sure that everything's, nothing's happening that's, let me just say, naughty.
Do you already have a company
Yes.
that you're using?
Yes.
Which one is it?
It's called,
Just wondering.
it's out of Hayward, it's the closest one, I think it's called Dave's, protection services.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of,
I heard Graveyard. I thought, is that the name of the company, Graveyard? No.
No. So they have a car, they have a big light, they do this for other people.
This guy named Dave.
No, I know they use it in Modesto. They use private security for their large encampment, and there they picked like a place, and they have everyone camping in one place, and then they have their program there. And the reason they have it is because then they can keep people from camping everywhere else.
Mm-hmm. But down there it's called Jeff's. Yeah, Vice Mayor Harvey.
What? That was good. That was 10 out of 10. What is the relationship like with Field of Dreams and that organization? Do you have a direct kind of channel with them that they can speak directly with you?
I'm on speed dial with Fred.
Good.
He sends me pictures. This is what's happening. Do something. Last week, somebody was hitting golf balls. I don't know why. And then someone else was sitting somewhere he didn't want them to sit. I send our staff over. I asked people to move on. And then he also asked us not to, people were fighting over the plug, where they charge. So he asked us to turn that off.
Mm-hmm.
So we did. So they have to come to the Haven to charge their phones because there were some disagreements around, let's just say, the charging station. Right. So Wednesday, he sent me a picture of the guys. I sent someone over. He called. He said thanks. I'm like, okay. So we're on speed dial with him.
Great. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No. I'll open it up for public comment.
Hi, I'm Claudia Robbins. I live at 19167 Robinson Road, Unit A, here in the city of Sonoma. And I've been following the SOS for years. I totally agree with Norma's Barnett's earlier comments about let's not be punitive here. And I feel like there are a lot of restrictions here that are unnecessary. Number one, the additional cost for a security company that's going to come by, if I understood correctly, at certain hours, 10, midnight, 2. It's not clear to me why someone local or the police couldn't do that, but maybe this has been worked out differently. That's a huge cost. That's a huge cost when our police station is right here, and they're just going by. I don't see any need for permits for overnight parking in this whole city for everyone. We want to encourage people to be off the street and in a safe place. And I'm not sure why there should be only 10 spaces when we have so many people who need parking. And then people who are coming to the Haven for dinner and then staying at the church, if they have cars, need a place to park too. And then if we have permits for overnight parking, we're adding something extra to a layer of people who are already under a great deal of stress. And we know that homelessness is increasing in this city, in this county, in this country. And it's time for us all to do all we can to help other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Me, of course.
Just a couple of comments I'd like to make. First of all, I would like to say that it was Kathy King's idea to an offer to hire a private security person. And I hope that gives you some idea of the degree to which Kathy and other members of the Haven and SOS have gone to try to work things out cooperatively with the larger community. Also, I want to emphasize that the law that Mr. Walter and Logan were talking about is a Ninth Circuit Court law. That's a superior, I believe, a superior court law.
Appellate.
Pardon? Appellate. Okay, sorry. I don't know these things. Passed a number of years ago, saying you could not discriminate against the homeless. So if the homeless don't have a place to go, as Amy said, then we have to provide in some way for them. So this is not just some dinky little law. It's a serious law, and that has a lot of weight behind it. And then I just want to make a couple of comments about the rules. I believe that some of the rules and restrictions that have been placed on how the safe parking is going to be set up are very important. We need to have clarity about what's expected of people who are homeless and who are using our services. And so I'm certainly not somebody who's against rules, just ask my children. And but I think there are too many rules. I think the limit is, well, I won't say that. The limit on the number of spaces that can be used is way underestimated. And the more people we have sleeping in their cars, comfortable as they can be, and have that safe place to stay in, I think it's better to have 20 parking places than 10 parking places. It's better for the community, and it's also better for the people who need the services. And there are probably some other limits that I would call question into, but I'll just use that as an example. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one come forward, I will close public comment and bring it back to the council for discussion. Councilmember Hundley.
Thank you. I'm excited to see this coming so close to the finish. I agree that there does seem to be a lot of rules, and it does seem like it comes at a high price, but it's important to me that this program is successful, because I think that I'm hoping that it will be the first of several iterations of this kind of program around the entire valley. Back when we did Safe Parking 1.0, we had 5 parking spaces, and the thought was to have a small scale model that could be replicated in like church parking lots and places like that. So it was intentionally made very small. I think that because the need has grown so much, that 10 is more appropriate. But I think that if we got 10 participants that were willing to abide by the program and enter the services of SOS, and I think that would be very successful. And I see this as sort of a first step, and based on the success of this program, I do think that there are other places, particularly in the valley, that this program would also be very helpful. So this is going to be the first in this area, and I think that it is necessarily being very strict, and as we go, we can see if there's any remaining problems that need to be fixed. We can see if there's anything that's overkill that maybe we can relax the rules on. But I think that this is a great program to move forward onto, and especially since, I remember something that Norma said last time, that we're always going to have homeless, and it's just going to be a part of reality. I think there's a lot of people that the only reason that they haven't become homeless is because they have a safety net. And so I think that it's a matter of coming up with your systems of how you're going to handle when people lose their housing, and especially in a high cost area like ours, it's happening more and more. So it's very important to have some sort of system. The city of Sonoma could not afford this, and I think we're very lucky that here we have an organization that's willing to fundraise to cover this cost. So I just am excited to see how it goes, and I think that, you know, whatever needs to be fixed, we can fix it. I am about the parking lot situation. On a separate note, I feel somewhat strongly being such an alcohol-focused economy and community that allowing people to leave their cars freely is important, because I think that the thought of getting a ticket is enough to, if someone's like right on the line of whether they should be driving or not, then they probably would go get their car because they don't want to get a ticket. Whereas existing, we know that you can just leave your cars, and people just do it a lot. So that part I am not interested in doing. I think, again, we can see how it works out, and if there's problems, maybe come back and talk about it again.
Is that a separate issue that you were just talking about?
Well, there's 2 resolutions tonight. The second one is sort of this putting the overnight parking on our other parking lots.
I'd like to go next, if you don't mind. So I actually have heard from a number of parents. We had a parent here last time. I'm also a parent. About the use being right next to the kids' ball field. I think that if we were to make a plan for where to provide services for homeless people and a parking lot for people to spend the night, it would not be right next to where children are playing. That would not be, I don't think that's a good use, and that's not a criticism of what you're doing, Kathy, because I think you're doing more than could possibly be asked of anybody. But if we had to pick which 2 uses would go next to each other, a day center and an overnight parking for homeless people and a children's playground, probably we would not put them next to each other. And I have a lot of concerns about that. And when I think about that, I think about how every single religious organization except for one has rejected the idea of even having overnight parking. And even religious leaders who have criticized the city for not doing enough, they don't have a homeless parking in their church parking lots, and they're empty at night. They're not doing it. And then I look at the county, and they've given us more money this year, but they have a substation with the police. They're right there. That's where all the staffing is, and they're not having any parking there. So it's like the entire county for the entire valley is willing to do nothing. Every religious organization in this town, except for one, which is willing to have 15 cars, as far as I know, is willing to do nothing. And then the city is being asked to put homeless parking right next to a children's playground. That's kind of where we're at. And then the choice is like, well, either you care about the homeless or you don't. But I think that's a false choice, because I think really it's very unfair that, and I feel very let down by the county for a complete failure to provide any services whatsoever. And we are a tiny, tiny town of 10,000 people, and we are being asked to do the only homeless services in this entire valley. I think we're in a very hard spot, very hard. And so and I think it's an unacceptable spot on the long term. Long term to say that the valley is allowed to say we're going to do nothing, and that every religious organization except for one is allowed to say we're going to do nothing, and then the city is being told you're going to have homeless services right next to a children's playground. That is not tenable in the ongoing future. And so maybe on a short-term basis, that's what we're doing, but I don't think it's a good plan. I don't think it's good planning. I don't think they're compatible uses. And I don't think saying we should look for somewhere else and then not coming up with something is acceptable. And I don't think the small town of Sonoma is equipped to take on the responsibility for providing the only homeless services in the entire valley. I don't think that's a good plan. I don't think it's good for the citizens. And I think we do have to weigh competing concerns. Of course, I think as moral people, we have an obligation to care about the poor and to do what we can. I agree with that 100%. And I agree also with the public comment about not making people's lives more stressful. I think that's right. But also, to the extent that the entire valley is shirking their responsibility and telling the city of Sonoma, you fix it, that cannot stand either. And so we're going to have to figure out how to get different cooperation and different collaboration, because this situation is not right. And I think that has nothing to do with the people providing the services or the people receiving the services, but this is a major undertaking, and it is the start. It's the start. 10 parking spaces is certainly not the end of what the services that are needed here. So I have very mixed feelings about it, but I think that this is not having these services next to a children's playground, which is what a ball field is. I don't think anybody who was making a plan for where to provide those services would select that location at this point. If we were starting new, I don't think it's a good location. And I take the concerns of the parents that have contacted me really seriously. I think it is really serious, and I think that kids have a right to feel comfortable, to ride their bikes where they're playing, to feel safe here. I think parents have a right. People really invest in trying to live here. It's very expensive. It's hard to live here. They have a right to feel like their kids are safe. And so it really is a balancing, and it's not one-sided that either you care about poor people or you're cruel. I don't think that's the consideration at all. It's that we all have a right to enjoy this community, and given that every other agency is completely shirking their responsibilities, I would like to hear more about what the plan is forward going, because I don't think this can be a long-term plan. Councilmember Cook.
Well, thank you, Mayor Harrington. I agree with you 100%. I do believe that there is a disconnect with the county. A $1.78 billion budget can't provide services for the homelessness crisis that we have. I don't cuss, so I won't say I'm mad as heck, is what I'll say, because this is upsetting. It's very upsetting. But on the other end, I want to thank you, Kathy, and I want to thank your board of directors and what the SOS has done. I think it's great. I will be supporting this tonight, because the last time this came to the council, I thought the board of supervisors would end up helping do something down the valley. The reason I asked the question earlier about what the criteria is City of Sonoma, County of Sonoma, unincorporated area, we're all the same. We always talk about the sphere of influence. We always talk about all these different things. But when you vote for your supervisor and you live in the city of Sonoma, you get to vote for the supervisor. So there needs to be this disconnect with the county is getting ridiculous. It's not just in the homelessness. And that's why I'm running for supervisor, because this disconnect has to end. The whole homelessness issue is going to get worse, and hopefully we can do what May Harrington was talking about, get more services out there. I agree, this isn't the perfect spot, but it's really all we have right now, so that's why I'll be supporting it. But I think that as time goes on, we need to take a hard look at this and try to figure out, because as the housing crisis continues, homelessness is going to continue. And it's not just the poor. There's other things that happen in people's lives where they just need a safe place to go. There's other issues like that. And they're going to get worse before they get better. That's the sad part about what's happening right now in California. So I will be supporting both of the resolutions. And I just want to thank our staff, and I want to thank Kathy King and your board of directors for the good work.
Thank you. Madeline?
Well, it's interesting, I agree with you about the county. The reason we got involved in this, remember, they took our money away. That's the only reason we got into this, because in the beginning, They took our money. To deal with the county, I'm afraid what that might end up to be. I don't know what it would be. So that's kind of, that's really frightens me. The other thing with the playground, so please forgive me, Madam Mayor, but if any kid plays baseball from 10 p.m. to 9, their parents should go to jail, number one. 9 to 1, and then they're there from 9 to 1. I don't know if they're little kids. I've seen dads bring their kids out there to play. I've never gotten a call. I don't know why people are afraid of me, but they could give me a call because I'm nice. I don't want them to feel that I don't care about their children. That would be the last thing. But I agree with, what you have said. I think this is going to be a Band-Aid, and I think you are doing the best that you can. And obviously, you're going to have to kick up fundraising to be able to support the things that you're doing. So I think that's going to be part of your goal now. But I agree with what the mayor is saying. But it's here. We can't do anything about it. I support this. It isn't the best situation. I think we all know that, but this is what it is. So, I don't know. I agree with you. I think Kathy's done the best that she can with the baseball. Is it baseball or softball?
Both.
Okay. And so I mean that's the best that we can do. And it is sad growing up in the city. I know you did too. I saw things I never should have seen, and I would hope that our children here don't see those things as well. But I'm afraid of the county because if they get involved, they're going to come with rules, and it might not be a happy situation. So I agree that we need more help. That the problem we have is that we have a beautiful city, we have wonderful people, so everyone thinks it's all fine and good here. We have all the problems of the big cities. We just have less money. Every problem that LA has, we got the same problems, but we have less money. So, but I appreciate what our mayor is saying, and thank you, Mr. Cook, for supporting this. I support it as well.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Harvey?
I want to really appreciate the work that staff and that Kathy King and her team have done to bring this forward, and the work of our homelessness subcommittee, Rachel and Madeline. I asked a lot about, what is the relationship with the police? What is the relationship with the Field of Dreams and things like that? And some of the stuff I know, some of it's to just kind of clarify for the public that we're doing as much as possible and that there is a good relationship there. I think you've put together a really high quality program. There are ways out for people. It's about assistance and moving them out of homelessness. I think that's extremely important. I think the relationship with Field of Dreams is important because I agree with Mayor Harrington that this is not an ideal location. We all would want this in a place that could provide more parking, that could provide some separation. And there are legitimate concerns in our community. And so I think that to alleviate them, I think you've taken every single step that you can to alleviate those concerns and that you're stepping out there. I think we need to report back on this, maybe in 3 months to see how it's going, what incidents there have been, just to see how this goes forward. I do feel like a lot of times, whether it's climate change at times or issues with homelessness, that a lot of weight is put onto this small entity that we have here to do something and be the lead on this. And in all honesty, this council and the previous council took a lot of steps towards alleviating the housing and homelessness crisis. We've put together a housing trust fund that's a 1% tax on TOT. It's going to generate a few $100,000 a year for housing. The previous council, before I was here, approved SAHA, which is one of the densest, it's the densest low-income housing project that we have in the city of Sonoma, which will break ground soon, which will help provide relief. This council raised minimum wage, which is also going to help people get out of homelessness and maybe have a little more money in their pocket. So we are making great strides on this, and this is an additional piece of that. So I think that we're doing what we should be doing, and in some cases more than. And and the county needs to step up. They need to provide some other location within the valley. Other institutions that want to be involved in this should be stepping up and doing everything that they can as well to try to solve this problem, because it's a community-wide problem, and I recognize that for sure, and I know that you do as well. I think what you're doing with the Vintage House to house seniors with other seniors, I think that program is fantastic. I think it's an amazing way for people to not only build friendships and relationships, but also get housed, and you should be proud of that, and I think that's great, and I think there's a lot of good things happening there. And it is our responsibility to take care of these people. So I want to know how the program's going in the next few months. As far as the question about overnight parking and other areas, people are allowed to if we pass this, people would be allowed to park overnight in the plaza.
Well, the plaza, actually, the back of City Hall already says kind of no public parking. So that's kind of 24/7.
In the horseshoe.
In the horseshoe.
Right.
Behind there. So the council changed their resolution, changed the ordinance a while ago where you can set regulations via resolution. But I don't see where there is, on any of our parking lots, that there is any time limits.
So I'm
in
asking
place
specifically around the plaza and the public parking that's there, so generally the drinking happens on the plaza.
Right, and those cars could stay overnight as they do now.
Right. So I think that is an important question. I don't think that necessarily limiting Depot and the other ones is going to harm that, because it's semi-rare occasion where people are parking in Depot. I'm sure at events and things like that, that's happening. So I would be comfortable with that, because there's, when I've had to walk home, which has never happened.
Because you bike.
Because I bike. Yeah, because I do bike.
You can get a DUI on a bike.
It's a BUI. But the plaza is kind of where the nexus of that is happening, I would think.
Yeah, and maybe just one point I could to say to this issue. If council's not comfortable kind of taking the 3 parking lots that we've included here as staff, the main one I was trying to do a little broader brush, but I do think it's important that you put some restrictions on the police department. Because otherwise what you've got is you could have people coming, you've said 10 people, so you have 11 or 12, and how do you say those folks can't park there? The only way to say they can't park there is to put some regulations on the lot that says no overnight parking except by permit with this program. So that was kind of the link that we needed. If on the second resolution you want to take out Depot, City Hall is probably not as necessary. If you want to take out Depot, I was just trying to create that other closer connection where there is parking. And again, we don't control the vet's parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to make sense that we would have to do it here in order to make a viable regulation. I mean, if people don't have to have a permit to park there, then they're not going to get a permit to park there, and there's no way we can regulate it. So in order to do that, we have to do it for at least this one. I would support doing it for Depot as well, but I'll leave it to the rest of the council to discuss that.
Councilmember Hundley?
I would argue that when we have large special events, which we have them throughout the summer, that people are parking in other places. If there was a way where special events, it was different, I would feel differently about that.
Councilmember Cook?
Well, my thought process is that's an empty car and then there's a full car. Is there a way that we could make the difference in that? Because I think it defeats the purpose if you take the Depot Park out of it, because then that means that instead of using the services that they have just down the road, they would go over to the Depot Park.
Except no one's parking at Depot Park now. They're parking in other parking lots, but they're not parking there.
For now.
For now, or for this entire time. They're just in other parking lots. Like, Depot Park is not a problem. We could see if it becomes a problem and then come back and make a rule about it.
So just if council was interested in the edit that Councilmember Hundley is saying, you could say within the resolution, there's no overnight parking except by permit or during special events between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And then you can determine which parking lots do you want. The primary parking lot that does need to be included is the police parking lot. But if you wanted to strip out the other two, that's really the pleasure of the council.
I mean, I guess the question would be then what is an event? Is farmer's market an event? Is whatever? I mean, I guess we should consider basically any event that.
Well, it would be designated, and then there would have to be, or like posted events where only if there's a sign that says.
Well, the other thing is the other thing is, again, a permit, we kept the term permit fairly general. So a permit, for example, when we have an emergency out here and we need to use this parking lot for emergency vehicles, then we would be giving emergency vehicles permit. Or there would be a sign up front that says restricted for emergency response, emergency permit only. So there's different ways. So a permit could be given for a special event. A permit, I don't think there'll be that active enforcement by police, even if someone, let's pretend, looking at this parking lot, if a homeless individual did come in at 2 a.m. and park there in the middle of the night and they weren't in one of these, say, 10 spaces, the plan would be to have a conversation with that person the next day. We're not kicking that person out at 2 o'clock in the morning. So, but we do want to make sure that we've got a rule enforced that we can, kind of create the regulations that the council's interested in the program.
I have a question. Do you want to go?
Well, just going back to my concern, if if somebody's at a special event and they're parked in Depot Park, it's the thought of whether they leave their car there or they pick it up. And I think that if it's not a problem now, I think I'd rather get started and see how it goes. Because I don't know. People should be able to freely leave their cars overnight in this town and not have to worry about them because people drink a lot.
Okay. I have a question. Were any other parking lots considered for this program?
There's a long history of parking lots that have been considered for this program.
And
I can answer that. I asked every single church if we could use their parking lots.
And what did they tell you?
No. Now, St. Leo's had it go to their council, and then the council took 2 months, 3 months, and then they agreed, but by that time we had shut down. And so we would need a transportation out to St. Leo's, but that had to go through their council.
But
Let me ask you this. Why do people need transportation if they're in cars that work?
The people that, the parking lot, they said they would take people, I'm sorry, I'm getting my winter shelter mixed up. Some people, they wouldn't need transportation, but they didn't want to drive out there because maybe they don't have enough gas. So it was too far for them.
But just to be clear, this was 2 years ago, not the most.
2 years ago, yes. So I went to the ministerial group. I went to each church individually, and because they have preschools, because they have events, and they rent out their buildings, or they have a school that they.
Gosh, that sounds a lot like being next to a children's playground.
So they were unwilling to do that. So
the reason with the preschools is different. It's not that it's because of the parents of the children not paying preschool tuition rather than just parents being mad, and it would bankrupt the church.
Correct.
Okay, but parents are paying property taxes and rent, and they're also mad. I mean, I don't.
So, and then also they'd have to leave by 6 o'clock in the morning. There is, so that was the other issue. Then there'd have to be a staff person there that got people out at 6 o'clock in the morning. And so to open up the church for Zumba or whatever, church hall. So that was the issue.
So I would support this program for 3 months, but I think that exploring other places that are not next to a children's park has to be done. I see this program as only expanding, and those are for forces that are not controllable by the city of Sonoma, which is economic stratification. That is a 30-year process, which we are reaping the benefit of now, starting with Governor Ronald Reagan getting rid of all of our mental health care. So that is not something that the city council is prepared to remedy for the state of California or the entire United States. And so we can anticipate that this program will only grow larger. And I do not think it is a compatible use with a place where kids play. And so I'm fine with supporting it for 3 months, but those efforts, every other religious group, and they are on Sundays preaching about how homeless people have to be taken care of. That means that they have to make hard decisions with their own constituents as well. And so I'd like to see St. Leo's reapproached. They do not have a preschool there, and if the issue is giving people enough gas money to drive to St. Leo's, it can't be more than 1.5 miles from here. Then that's something we could discuss. But
I'm just saying it took 3 months to get on the agenda.
Mhm.
Of the committee. So in 3 months, St. Leo's, I don't think they'll make that fast of a turnaround. Sorry. Yeah, and then
I mean, so I can only say my opinion. Fundamentally, having homeless services right next to a place where kids play is probably not good urban planning, and there are other locations like the entire valley that could do something. And right now, every single person is saying no, and we are not saying no, but I am saying long term that is not sustainable next to a children's playground. And I think that perhaps you could disagree with it. I think it's fairly obvious that those are not two uses that you would select to have next to each other. And an answer has to be come up with other than everybody else doesn't want to do it. So the incredibly small town of Sonoma is going to take on this entire responsibility. That I don't think that works. So, Councilmember Hundley.
2 things. One, just a reminder that the Haven has existed in its spot for 12 years. It was for a long time a homeless shelter in its exact location. That is where it is. The city of Sonoma, it is the only place like it that we have. I think that the city itself has a responsibility to address homelessness. The county also does in the valley, but the city also has its piece. And it has been this use for a very long time. And I'm not interested in putting a timeline on it. I think that having a report back, and that if there's problems, adjustments can be made. And if it's catastrophic failure, we can always pull the plug on it. And I can make a motion.
Are there any other comments? I would just respond prior to a motion being made that all the evidence that we have heard back from SOS is that they are providing more services than ever, more meals than ever. And so the use has intensified, and that is why the rub is coming, sort of like to a head now, because there are more people than ever using these services, because there are more homeless people than ever. Those things are true, and it will only increase. I mean, that's terrible, but that's true. It will only increase. So, it's a question of urban planning. So, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that homelessness is going to continue to increase. We've lost even more homes with the last fires, and it's going to be, it's a constant issue, and affordable rents continue to rise, and there's other solutions to be made there. I agree with Councilmember Hundley that I wouldn't support having a hard limit on this at 3 months. I would support having a review in 3 months, and I believe in the board and SOS's ability to handle the situation appropriately and handle questions that are done with Field of Dreams and parents and things like that, and take that seriously, because I know that you do, and I believe that you do, and we do as a council as well. So I'd like to hear a report back at that time, but having I think long term, yeah, but long term is years out. I think it's going to take a long time to develop for the county to develop a program. Should we pressure them? Should we maybe write a letter? Should we do something like that to push some support for that? Absolutely, we should. But as far as it getting done in 3 months, I mean, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So you want to make a motion? We'll do it.
Through the mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma authorizing the city manager to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Sonoma Overnight Support for the implementation and operation of a safe parking program in the police department parking lot at 175 First Street West.
Second.
And were you intending that the 3 month check-in would be, where is that in your motion here?
It is not my motion. I figured that was direction to staff. I don't think it needs to be in the resolution.
Okay.
I think it's written, currently the MOU has it written as a 6-month check-in. We could change that to 3 months.
Is that part of your motion or no?
Or you can give us that direction separately.
It's just. No, it wasn't.
No, that's what I'm saying.
It's,
We're
that is
clarifying.
just direction to staff that we would like an update in 3 months. In 6 months, we will have an official update on the program, but I mean, we could have as many updates as we want. We just have to ask staff to give them to us. So that's my motion.
Roll call?
Councilmember Agrimonti,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Harrington.
I'm very uncomfortable with a 6-month check-in.
We have directed staff to give us a 3-month check-in.
But that's not part of the motion, so.
It doesn't have to be.
But as soon as we have a PSP, we're not gonna have it, so it's like.
We do things all the time by directing staff, and then they come back and report to us.
I mean, I guess I will support it, but at the time that it comes up for revision and in 3 months, there had better be a report on who exactly has been reached out to, how many times they have been contacted, and what exactly was said, because
And you want SOS to do that?
well, if nobody does it, then we'll know that no one's working on finding a different location and that the preferred location is right next to a children's playground. So whoever's going to do whatever actions they're going to do, we will find out in 3 months. But the catastrophic thing that could happen is, you know, we have people who have a variety of very serious needs right next to children. So I am extremely concerned about having those two uses together. I am extremely concerned about that. So if you would not shout out from the audience, that would be great. Thanks. City Manager Capriola.
So I just want to finish, are we clear on finishing that vote? First one.
So your vote is yes?
It was, yeah.
Okay, then the motion carries unanimously.
Okay. So I just want to be clear. So at this point, the first resolution's been passed 5-0. I hear direction from council, watching kind of body language, that we'll bring back a 3-month report. The agreement with SOS already talks about a 6-month report, but we'll bring back an interim 3-month report. And then the next resolution, I'd like to have council talk about the next resolution on parking. And then Mayor Harrington, if your request for outreach and that type of thing is a different piece of work. So if staff is going to do that work, would need you to make that as a motion and hear direction from the full council on that. Because that could be talked about as part of this, even though it's not listed as a motion, it's part of this broader conversation. So if that is an interest of the council, I just need clarity so I know what we're bringing back.
So I would like to ask a question about that, thank you, which is, has city staff or the homeless committee of the city council worked themselves on direct outreach to people who might provide these services, or has that always been done through SOS? Or in conjunction?
I'll answer first. From a staff capacity, we have not done outreach. I have had conversations with Supervisor Gorin, expressing that there is a need for broader county support on some of these actions. And we'll be having a conversation with the county executive officer, but in terms of staff research and outreach, we have not done that. But I'll turn that to the two council members in the ad hoc.
We've been in contact, well, when we got the money, CDC, right? Jeffrey, and I apologize, gosh, he's such a great guy. Jeffrey Ross, that was a hard one, thank you. And you know, we need to keep doing that. And Rachel and I we've discussed this. We need to go to Russian River because those people are gorillas when it comes to getting things that they want. And we're just, you know, we're a small place and we're too pretty and people think we don't have a problem. But I think we need to do something more. But I think we've reached out, we've been meeting with the different agencies as we meet. But I just finished Mark Benioff's book. I'll give him a jingle, see how we can get a hold of him. He gave $30 million to San Francisco for homeless. Why can't he give us 500,000?
I think he's on Twitter, yeah.
Well, just a little bit of history of how this subcommittee was created. It was back last year, when the county decided that they would no longer fund programs that did not support their housing first and no barriers rules. So that is when they stopped giving money to fund the homeless shelter at the Haven. At the same time, we were getting very frustrated because it felt like the city was shouldering a disproportionate burden on trying to support the work of SOS and similar programs, and that there were no other programs like it in the county. So that is when we started sitting down and meeting with Susan Gorin, staff from the CDC, to talk about status of homelessness support in the valley and how that there was none. So we had many meetings with that crew, and that eventually evolved into, after Susan procured $250,000 for us, and we found out that there was going to be this additional, then there was going to be additional money that was coming from the state that was going to be allocated. So then it turned into this valley-wide task force, way too many meeting effort to figure out an integrated system of all these different programs that didn't exist in the valley or did exist in the valley, and how this money could be divided up. We took all the different programs, figured out what the best way was to split up this money, and that is how we found new programs like Interfaith Shelter Network that is doing rapid rehousing for the first time in this area ever. There's more people doing sort of intake into the system. Just leave that at that. And so there has been a lot of work, and there sort of is now this sort of integrated thing. The problem being that still there has not been a location in the valley where resources can actually be situated. So I know Kathy's called around trying to get places, like, you want to talk about land use planning, like tell people you want to have homeless services or homeless shelter, and nobody wants you. So I mean, you could say you don't want it here. I agree. It could be in a better place, but it's much easier said than done. So there's been a lot of work done. The dream would be to have something more centrally located. So if anybody's listening out there and has a building that they would like to give the city or SOS, that would be awesome. Or if you want to rent it to one of us, that would be awesome. But there's been so much work, so much collaboration done on this, so much harassing the county about it, and I think there's a lot more work to do. But I think with safe parking specifically, that this is something that would be easier to, after our very successful program, then to turn to the county and say, you need to do this somewhere in the valley, like figure it out.
Thank you for all that work. And my thought is, of course, with the Ninth Circuit ruling that homeless people could be sent to any parking lot owned by the county and they cannot be moved. They don't have any rules. So if they want to take over the parking lot in the Springs and be right there by El Molino, they absolutely have a right and they cannot be moved. So with regard to nowhere to go, that's not true, because the law is they can go anywhere as long as the county doesn't have a program saying where they have to go.
And I agree with that. However, how safe will these people be if they just wander into any parking lot? I think safety is an issue for us and you as well. So that's my concern. Just parking in any old parking lot is not going to provide safety to these people. That's my issue.
Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I think to put it into the discussion is, I think what Councilmember Hundley said was correct. Once the county sees what we're doing, they can find a spot, and it won't be very hard, because if anybody's listening, Pythian, if you look, there's a lot of different places. Pythian Road, which is north or west of here, and there's a lot of different areas. And I think the big part here is safe parking. We're talking anybody can park anywhere, but when you look at safe parking, because these individuals who are in these vehicles are human, and they have the same fears that we have in our house. you know, and they need to be somewhere safe, so.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate the discussion that we're having about this because this is a really serious issue, and I feel like a lot of times we're talking about serious issues, but we're not actually discussing them as a whole. So I really appreciate that. And I'd reiterate that a lot of these people that are in these cars are working in our community, and that's maybe one of the reasons that they want to be here. Save some money on gas when money's as tight as it is for them already. Maybe their kids go to school in our communities. I'm sure some of them do. So all of those are other reasons that they want to be close. And I think that we do need to see solutions in the valley. I think, access to safety is of the utmost importance, especially when you have women and children in the car, and men too want to feel safe. And also access to services and the fact that, we're providing some pathway out of it, I think is really nice too. So we're maybe hopefully transitioning some people. I look forward to seeing what we bring back in 3 months. I'm not exactly sure what communication looks like, and what's going to be satisfactory on that note. Is it just there's been a few calls in, we've had a couple discussions, is that satisfactory? Or is it just like, if we do want to make that secondary motion, I'm not really clear on what's an acceptable, what counts as a conversation, what counts as effort in that direction, especially in a time as short as 3 months with holidays and everything like that coming up. I think it's going to be tight to get something real started in that amount of time. In a 6-month period, I could see we've had this many meetings. This is kind of where it's going. Anyway.
City Manager?
Okay. So, here's my vision of what we could be coming back in 3 months, and I'm just going to call it by March 1. So by March 1, we would bring back to you, working with SOS, there would be kind of a database, a schedule of how many people used it every day, number one. Number two, it might be if there were any folks that were who were then able to be transitioned into services. They were, or to a different location, that could also be tracked. I think if there were any calls for service or neighborhood complaints, that stuff would be tracked. But it's going to be that's kind of, looking at overall, and I think Kathy would also probably be providing an update about what the actual costs of the program are. So I see a bit of qualitative and quantitative, but it is wrapped around this program only as kind of the 3-month rollout and what we're seeing, an opportunity for council to do any other kind of, so if there's something more that the full council wants, then I would need that direction as part of this item.
Well, I would like some work to be done on finding a different location for the parking. And so.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there should be a ad hoc on that, or a committee formed.
Or the homeless committee, yeah.
If they want to continue, yeah.
At this point, I'm going to cede my position on the committee. It put in a lot of work on it, and I think that it would be beneficial for other people to get to work on this issue.
Because I would like to be one of those.
Okay. All right. So, just thinking about how to proceed. Okay, so. Okay, I'll make a motion to replace Councilmember Hundley with Councilmember Cook as a member of the homeless ad hoc. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Agrimonti? Aye. Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you for your work, Councilmember Hundley, and thank you for your willingness to work on this, Councilmember Cook. So I would like to hear back then in 3 months from the ad hoc on what efforts have been made either by SOS or city staff or the ad hoc, the groups that are working on this, on finding an alternate location. I guess that's a motion.
Okay, second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Agrimonti? Aye. Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley?
No.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-1.
Okay, should we do item B here? Does somebody have a motion on the parking restrictions?
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion for a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma establishing parking restrictions in public parking lots.
Friendly amendment. Can I amend the motion to exclude events from the overnight parking restriction?
You mean to add?
Oh, so
How
the
are we
overnight.
writing it? Adding special events?
You would say no overnight parking except by permit or special events between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
I would accept that as part of the motion.
Posted special events?
We
There
would have to
be
post,
some
I mean, yeah,
sign.
it's kind of a, this is a hard, the world of special events, I mean, I'm not quite sure how we do this and have it signed accurately.
I would say all special events that formally rent the plaza, basically, like any piece of the, I mean, if it's, I think farmers market should be excluded, I think 4th of July, I think Vintage Festival, I think of Film Fest, things like that. I mean, heck, people are going to want to park. I mean, honestly, we probably should just exclude Depot, because now I'm thinking, like, people are going to park there for Stompers games.
You've got Stompers games, you've also
So
got
let's
folks
exclude
and
Depot.
vets. Yeah, so my recommendation would be to keep it cleaner at this point, would be
Yeah.
to make this, take out B and C and just make this the police department site. That would be my recommendation back to council at this point as a friendly
Councilmember
amendment.
Cook, it's your motion.
I'll remove my motion.
Does somebody else want to make a motion?
Well, I move to approve a resolution of the City Council establishing the parking restriction in parking lots, excluding Depot Park from the list that was presented by staff. Does that work? All right.
Second. Roll call?
Councilmember Agrimonti? Aye. Councilmember Cook?
No.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-1.
Great, thank you. I think that's it for item 6.1. And I would like to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Kathy, for your work. All right.
Okay, now on to item 6.2, report of the city council on enforcement actions regarding violations of the city's vacation rental regulations. City manager and city prosecutor.
Thank you, Mayor Harrington, Council. So a few months ago, we talked about our vacation rental, and there was a desire to have a report come back to the council. And so what we have with you tonight is Bob Smith, who is our city prosecutor and oversees and manages the city code enforcement program. So he's going to give you just a little update how the enforcement program works. And our first report, our recommendation is we do this. This is kind of a 9-month report, but going forward, we recommend we kind of do this every 6 months, take some time to go through the administrative hearing process. But we have updated the website, and this report is posted on the city's vacation rental website. And we plan on doing that going forward. So with that, I'll turn it to Mr. Smith.
All right. It's kind of a 180 from your last agenda item, but nevertheless, vacation rental code enforcement. Gee, where to begin? Actually, prior to January of this year, we operated basically on citizen complaints and our own investigation of determination of possible violators for the vacation rental statutes. At the city's direction, this is one of the few ordinances, it's actually the only ordinance where we don't give a warning before we set them up for a hearing. So we looked at and vetted 3 different third-party contractors who actually sweep websites on a daily, weekly basis, depending on who you're talking to. The one we had selected is STR Helper. They sweep weekly. They provide us with a report of what they've likely candidates for vacation rentals. Thereafter, they take that likely list and they farm out each one to an individual human being validator who spends time ascertaining whether or not the rental is inside the city limits and is not permitted, at which point in time we are notified by the third-party contractor that they have a validated, non-complying address with 95% certainty. So we take that and start over. So we'll take that list and we investigate every one. We put our own files together. We go to the website ourselves. We prepare our own portfolio of evidence. And on occasion, we will, well, not on occasion, our list is always ultimately shorter than theirs when we're done. So far this year in that operation, once we've identified with confidence a address and an owner for illegal short-term rental, we send them a notice. Notice basically says, we want you to produce all your records for the time that you've been operating this so we can determine what your TOT owed is. And you need to pay your TOT TID that's owed. If you do all those things, or at least indicate to us that you're willing to work with us, then you don't need to go to the hearing, in which case you're not going to be subject to fines, penalties, and assessments other than what you are owed as delinquent in your TOT TID payments. So about half the people do that, and then others decide for whatever reasons they don't want to cooperate. And so we actually go to hearing. So the outline that is in the report is that there were 28 legal vacation rentals. We have requirements for legal vacation rentals, posting your number and other things they have to do on the website. If they're not in compliance, then we notify them, hey, you got to put your number up. It's usually that easy. There were 28 of them. They're all in compliance now. Illegal vacation rentals, we determined that there were 23. We went to hearing on 17 of them. 4 of them came up to us a prior first notice and paid. This is over 3 separate days of hearings, so they were August 23rd and then 2 in October. So we issued the 17 notices of administrative hearing and order. The hearings were heard on 17 of them. Our orders were upheld on 13 of them. 4 of them are still pending by the hearing officer. There has not been a determination yet. We're anticipating they will and find in our favor, and that the question will be not as to whether or not they engaged in the activity, but what is the tax owed. If you come to the city when you receive your notice and bring your records, we won't question your records unless you hand me a record that shows you had one stay, and I ask you, how come you have 6 reviews? So that sort of inconsistency, if there's any reason to doubt it, we actually push it a little bit. Otherwise, we take their records, we assume that their records are accurate, and we calculate their tax owed on that. If they misrepresent what they've the activity they've engaged in, and now already we're on to grounds where their credibility is a little suspect, so we might move forward to a hearing. If you tell me that I just made it available to relatives and I've got 74 reviews, knowing that reviews from Airbnb are at a max usually about 30% of the stays that are there, that's a large family. So I'm not buying that completely. So nevertheless, we have collected, I'll just update the numbers on those. We've actually collected about $29,500 in TOT/TID owed to date. In addition, we have collected an additional $6,800 in administrative cost of the hearing, cost of staff time in finding it. And we are anticipating payment on a balance uncollected yet of slightly over $60,000. We have 3 outstanding ones. The amounts will be determined. My guess is that those will collectively fall somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000 to $15,000 more in TOT/TID, and that does not include the additional sanctions cost for our time, city's time, administrative hearing officers' time. So that's what we're looking at. At this point in time, I can tell you that we are seriously looking right now at 20 more candidates that we think we might go to hearing on probably sometime in January. So as soon as we're able to determine whether or not, the burden of proof is more likely than not, which just means a little bit, we're like 95% or more before we'll send you a letter. And then you can show us that you're not doing it. And that has happened on a couple of occasions. So that's what we're putting together our portfolios and putting together our evidence portfolios. And come January, we'll probably, like I said, have hearings of those 20, 16, 17 of them maybe.
Great. I have a question. What was the cost of this program for the year?
The cost of the year for this program, well, I guess you would have to look at the contract price that you pay us, the amount of time of that contract that's this is not the only thing we do,
Sure.
of course.
But we have a service now that we're
It's
paying.
about $8,500 or something is STR Helper.
STR Helper is $8,000 for the year.
Okay.
And then you have the administrative hearing costs, which hopefully are all recovered by, in the administrative hearing officer's order. We can recover all of his costs.
And then in terms of the, we collected about 20, but we're owed 62, 63. What process is in place for collecting the remainder? Can you put a lien on the property, or how do you collect that?
If we have to, so far, nobody has absolutely refused to pay. They're all willing to pay. One of the glitches, it's just because this program is new, it's like we have a responsible party that doesn't have the money to pay. They want to pay by a credit card. We don't really have the wherewithal yet to accept that payment, but we're working with finance right now on how we can do that.
And then if you get an order against you, does it accrue interest at the legal rate, or it's just a straight order?
Accrues interest at the legal rate.
Oh, okay. It's 10%. Go ahead, David.
And I guess my question, because it wasn't part of the report, but the ones that you got, they're terminated.
Right.
So they're not doing this anymore. What happens on the second offense?
Well, it's interesting. I've only had one second offender, and she's the one, by the way, that is waiting till she can pay with a credit card. So, I mean, it's tough for some people. You know, her husband died, passed away. She's trying to keep the house. She rented out a room. She got caught. So we were a little bit gentle on her, and then we caught her again, and this time we were less gentle. So I don't think she'll do it a third time, but for the most part, they don't do it anymore.
I think one thing too is for folks that are in kind of a financial precarious place. There is the share program, which is an opportunity of vetted finding a roommate and potentially having a different kind of income. So Bob is connecting folks to some of those assets as well.
Councilmember Agrimonti?
Sure, thank you, Bob. You know, the share program I think is wonderful, but I don't want anybody living with me forever.
Right.
So I like for possibly a person in their senior years that need to supplement their income. And I think we talked about this in the beginning, and I don't think maybe a previous council was interested in it. But for me, I feel comfortable for someone who is in a financial situation, needs to supplement their income. We took recycling away. Nobody can make money that way anymore. So I don't know if we could, I mean, you don't have a comment, I wouldn't imagine, on that, but it really is something to consider.
Do you mean changing the regulation on Airbnb to allow certain people to have them?
Well, just maybe like someone, I don't know how they would prove that they need that type of financial assistance, but I see no harm in someone, I mean, it goes back to boarding houses, all of that stuff, but I don't see that, for me, I wouldn't mind if a neighbor needed help and wanted to take in a person to live with them, or even temporarily, no, not live with them, sorry. Temporarily, you know, somebody to spend a weekend at your house, just to supplement their salary, not necessarily, you know, something, wedding parties and things like that. But I don't even know how you regulate that. But that's just how I feel, because I think being with the Women's Club, we do have women who are elderly and need to supplement their income, and I thought that might be a great way to do it, and it would be protecting them and protecting the renter. But you know, that was something that was discussed a long time ago. But maybe we could take a look at it again someday.
Well, if it's any consolation, it's a very, very small percentage of these people that aren't second homeowners, or, I mean, some of these people are making $12.75 a night, 2.5 night minimums. So that's more representative on that end than it is on the people who are trying to support themselves in housing. But there are those people, so.
Well, it's interesting, you know, as all of us have worked on our political campaigns, I knocked on a lot of doors. I didn't know who they were. I knew who owned the house. They would say, I'm the cousin, I'm the nephew, and I know that something was up. And, but I guess, you know, I don't know. That was just a thought. I don't know how the council feels, if they feel it's something we should take a look at. But that's just something I thought would good. But I agree with what you're saying, Bob.
Any other questions?
So does the city ever take preemptive actions to try to prevent this before and kind of let people know that we are enforcing to stop them from doing it? Have we ever considered something like putting a notice in their water bill or whatever, just to be like, hey, you know, we are watching for this. It is illegal. You know, is that something we've ever considered, just to kind of preempt it?
It's been in the paper. There's been numerous articles in the paper. It's posted on the website. And quite frankly, I have never had a single person say, oh my gosh, I didn't know I couldn't do that here. You have most of them say, hey, I talked to the city and they said it was cool. That's somebody at the city said it was cool.
Which city?
I had one guy who walked in, he goes, I told my wife it was a bad idea. How much do I owe you? I want to pay it right now. So I think everybody knows they've just been getting away with it for a long time.
All right. Yeah, and then I had the similar question about the second violation, but it's already been answered. And then we don't do additional fines. So there's like, they only get hit with a fine if they take it to trial and don't immediately pay their TOT/TID.
If they don't produce the documents and we have to go to a hearing, they're going to wind up paying. There's a penalty for not producing the documents. And there's a penalty, well, the penalty is you're going to pay for the hearing cost if you lose. So you're going to have to pay the hearing officer's time and the city's time. So that's generally the hearing officer runs somewhere around $750 for a hearing. And our time is less than that, but they'll wind up paying that.
What's the cost for not producing documents?
The fine is $100 for the first day. You don't produce it, it's $200 for the second day and $500 every day thereafter that you don't produce it.
Okay.
What is are you done? Oh, so when you get, if someone is caught, then they pay the back TOT, and then is there an additional fine or just back TOT?
If they come to us and say, this is my records, I had 16 rentals, and here's the rate I rented it at, there's no additional penalty. You have to pay, there's penalties that are embedded in the calculation for what the arrearage is. There's an interest, an additional penalty, and if they knew they should be paying the city and don't, there's a 25% kicker on the TIT.
Okay, all right, thanks. If there's no other questions, I will take it out to the public for public comment. Terry? Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back for council discussion. We're just receiving this report, right? Okay. Thank you. Great. All right.
Thank you.
Oh, comments? Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck in January.
Hey, thank you. They're open, by the way.
Quick comment for his city manager. Would it be possible to kind of post about this on our Facebook page? Just because we have had people come before with questions about enforcement of illegal VRBOs, and so it would be good, especially if we get the word out about that. That would be good.
Can do.
Okay, item 6.3, hear a report on California legislative updates 2019, housing laws and local implications, and approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to retain staff services related to housing legislation in an amount not to exceed $30,000. Planning and Community Service Director David Storer. Delight us.
I would like for the city manager
Please.
to read a text that I just sent her a couple of seconds ago before I surprise her.
Mr. Storer is saying congrats. We just got our SB2 funding approved by HCD, so that is
All right,
$160,000 to help fund
How much is
housing.
it?
$160,000 to help fund an updated housing element, dealing with housing legislation, and a variety of other. And I want to thank Mr. Storer, who wrote the grant, put all the information together, and so
Great
on
job.
our way.
Does that mean you don't need the $30,000?
No, this is the $30,000 that will get reimbursed by the $160,000. We have to spend the money before we get reimbursed, but we have a source to get the reimbursed now.
And we can get reimbursed for the work that we've already done with the town halls and some of the other things that we've done already. So the Housing Trust Fund, for example, we get paid back for that. But I also want to thank Christina Tierney. She helped polish off the application. We are one of 54 cities that have already received their approval.
Oh, that's great.
Throughout the state. So that puts it in a little special category with HCD, I hope.
We're the best of that 54. Claire.
Best in town in America.
Yes, that's right. So you may have noticed that the legislature was pretty busy last year, and they passed quite a lot of bills. They actually did a lot of vetoing as well, the governor did. With a third year in a row that they've had about 100 bills or more relating to housing. That's good news. However, the bad news is some of them are very difficult to interpret and unpack. The good news tonight is that I only have 4 slides tonight to show you in your PowerPoint with respect to some of the big hits, so to speak, of the hot bills that have come off the hopper. The first one that I've outlined is SB 330 Skinner, referred to as the Housing Crisis Act of 2019. From a technical planning nerd perspective, this is the one that's got the most problems, because what it does is it creates a new process in which to review housing applications, which is not especially clear, and I'll get into that in just a moment. This first slide just shows you that particular bill, which a lot of public agencies, including the League and others, were opposed to as it was going through the legislature. The ones in red are the major ones if you're interested in reading about ADUs. The other ones by Friedman are 2 or 3 pages as far as the content, and I can get into those if you would like. Next. The 330 Skinner legislation creates a mini permit streamlining law, which is basically when public agencies receive an application for development, they have to, within 30 days, say that it's complete. They've submitted, applicants have submitted everything that they're supposed to, and then you take it to hearing. Well, this process is now called a preliminary application that basically freezes a public agency as to, if you have it on your list and somebody comes in for a pre-application, you cannot change the rules when they come in for what they need to submit at the time that they come in with a full application. And so it freezes your fees, your development standards, no changes. They do have 180 days in which they have to submit a full regular application. But this is a brand new pre-application process that's now part of our laws. The second thing that it does that's pretty big is restrict public agencies to no more than 5 hearings. And so you say, well, wait a minute, what happens if it goes to appeal? And so those things have not been finessed yet. So the brighter minds out there than mine are trying to figure out how to unpack that. And we also have this, a lot of public agencies have subjective standards for review of housing development projects. There's now a push to go with objective standards. And if you don't have them in place by January the 1st, you're going to be messed up. You're going to have no discretion. The other thing, too, is SB 330 limits the ability of an agency to regulate moratoriums, other types of caps, whether it's housing numbers or population-based. So this is taking us an extraordinary amount of time to unpack between now and the first of the year to see what we need to do, if we need to do something to our development code. So not only were we thinking of going into a development code update process, we're now compelled by the legislature to do certain things by January the 1st. Next.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So in terms of what a hearing is, if you have a hearing and it goes till 11 p.m. and you continue that hearing to another date, is that one hearing or two?
We don't know. And that's some of the stuff that we've got to try to figure out. Does an application, if you do a study session, is that a public meeting? It doesn't say differentiate between a public hearing, public meeting. It just says public meeting. And so we have to try to figure out what that means. And if we anticipate appeals, does that count towards the 5, or do you get 4 plus that appeal? What happens if it gets continued?
Or if you have the 6th one, then does that like not count? They cross that off? I mean.
Or what about applications that are currently in
Yeah.
line right now that come January the 1st may have already exceeded the 5? It's unclear and it's ambiguous. So we've got to try to figure out what it really means.
All right, thanks. Go ahead.
So what's our process of getting to just a public hearing about a thing? That's something we if this counts as a meeting, then that's something we may have to tighten up as far as how many, because I've seen projects that do like 3 public hearings, and it's a benefit to them in a way, because the hope there is that there's less chance of appeal. They've been more vetted by the planning commission. In some ways, it's kind of a thing that we're doing for them.
I would actually defer to counsel on a question that I thought of, haven't had the chance to talk to him, but if we enter into a development agreement, does that basically give us the right to not do what the law tells us to do? But I don't want to put him on the spot.
Oh, like can you waive it?
Well, can a development agreement waive the rights to 5 hearings, public meetings, whatever their term? So that's something that we'll talk with Jeff about and see if that's something that we can try to, again, unpack between now and the 1st of the year.
I thought that we had said that we weren't going to do study sessions because we had the issue of planning commissioners making comments and then being asked to recuse themselves, or being a demand being made that they recuse themselves later because of comments made at study session. Wasn't that a policy decision we talked about?
It may have been before my time, so I'll have to defer to the manager. I can tell you that on Mockingbird we had that. We've got a couple of other projects that have asked for study sessions.
So I would say you should talk to the city attorney and the city manager about that, because we had a fairly serious problem about study sessions, and I think we did decide that we were not doing them in the future and that they were disfavored for that reason. But anyway, it's not for us.
We'll have to go back and look at that. And I remember the issues.
Yeah.
I don't remember the conversation in the dais, but we can look at it. I want to ask David to clarify one thing, maybe for myself as much as council, on this question. So the need for objective standards, the issue is January 1, folks are, obviously we're not going to have a rewritten development code by January 1. So folks coming in, we can continue to try to get some of these objective standards in place, but it may be February, March, April. Is that correct? You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yes, so for example, we're not able to deny based on the lack of, well, if we have subjective standards, we're not able to deny a project based on those if we don't have objective standards in place. So the longer it takes is, there's more of that window for us to receive an application, but they would not be subject to any newly adopted objective standards. Next. Kathy.
How would that apply? I mean, we have specific things in the code that have been questioned, like for instance, requirement for housing on the things that get waived. A requirement for housing on a 2-acre or half-acre lot on 50%. How would something like this apply to that specific piece of the code? Is that a subjective standard? Is that?
That would be a subjective where they can come in and ask for exceptions to the code. We have certain base you can't exceed. An exception cannot exceed 30% of the requirement. Some of those things we'll have to look at to see if they're considered objective or objective.
All subjective pieces of our code are wiped.
Yes.
So anything that the council could have discretion about waiving is subjective?
Correct, yeah. That would be my
Is that right?
interpretation.
Jeff? That can't be right. I don't think that can be right.
Well, again, it's something we're still trying to figure out.
Because normally to me it would mean that you need to be on notice of what you need to comply with, and that is an objective standard so that people know what they need to do and you can't change it without them knowing. But if you have a standard that's like, it has to be this big, but you might be able to waive it, it's still objective because you understand what the minimum compliance is.
The easiest example to give in that regard, which supports your comments, Mayor Harrington, is the ability to get variances. The law clearly allows variances to be granted from standards, including objective standards. One of the problems we have with our code is we have another layer of the way you can avoid complying with objective standards. It's called exceptions. And our office has consistently expressed concerns about that portion of our development code because there's nothing in state law that authorizes the granting of exceptions. And in Sonoma, they've been granted on fairly flexible, moving target basis. So I hope that one of the things that's going to happen is the exception portion of our code will disappear as part of our rewrite.
So an exception is different than a variance.
It is. Variance has specific standards that you have to meet factually in order to obtain the variance. Generally, it's if other properties in the same zoning district in the vicinity are enjoying a larger FAR than what our code requires now, you can then apply for a variance to get that larger FAR, or the setback is to be reduced. If the other properties in the same zoning district in the vicinity have these smaller setbacks and you'd want it, and there's unusual circumstances in your property that would require that setback to be reduced, you can get that variance.
So the variance has to have an objective standard.
We're going to make them all very objective.
And these exceptions, because they've kind of been applied in not a very specific way, one could argue they make the underlying code not objective.
I think that's a good argument.
So are you saying exceptions is like a discretionary thing?
Absolutely. And that's built into the code and has been there for a long time.
And I can say from experience, the exceptions provision in our dev code is the quicksand, I think, in this whole development process. It's unique to Sonoma. I haven't seen it in very many jurisdictions that I've worked in. The variance is a very common tool. And as Jeff said, it's very objective. All right, next one, Kathy. So with respect to those bills that I outlined with respect to ADUs, and reviewing very quickly, we do actually need to go into our existing dev code with respect to ADUs and change some things. For example, we only allow ADUs in our 8 residential zones. We're now required to put them into our mixed-use zoning districts. Also, interestingly, there's the ability to require an owner to occupy either the main dwelling unit or the ADU has been removed, so we can no longer require that. There's some minor changes to JDUs, the juniors ADUs, which are parts of an existing dwelling, as opposed to an attached or detached ADU structure. Something that HCD is going to be looking for is incentives and prioritization in our new housing element for ADUs. And probably the thing that concerns staff the most and why we need some additional or supplementary staff is come January the 1st, our ordinance will become null and void if we don't change it. based on what I've just outlined in the first 4 bullet points. And there's probably some other things that I have to review with respect to minimum size of the ADU and fees. By the way, fees are going to be restricted under the new law for units that are less than 750 square feet. You can't get any impact fees. And then those that are greater than 750 square feet, they're in rough proportionality to those that you would collect for a single-family home on the same site. So.
This is the word harbinger that fits this, you know.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
I mean, this is a lot for a small city for us to undertake. This much code changing and all that kind of stuff with no additional help from the state. And especially the first one really concerns me because it calls into question a lot of different pieces. Is there ability for us to like put a hold on applications for a short period of time, you know, time certain, 6 months or something like that, for us to take that time to tighten up code? Is that not a possibility? I doubt it is.
I won't address the legal aspect of whether we can or can't, but what I can tell you is that Goldfarb and Littman, the people that have given us most of the attachments in your packet, they're telling us to adopt an urgency ordinance. So I can see that as being the method in which we address getting this done before the first of the year. But as far as outright, I have to defer to Jeff on that.
Yeah. I've not looked at it seriously to adopt a moratorium as we did with the cannabis, for example. There is a specific provision in the law. I don't think that has been changed, has it? 65858 of the government code lays out a basis for imposing zoning moratoria. That may be another avenue that we should look at for sure. It becomes problematic because it's going to be a very broadly sweeping moratoria. What applications do you want to freeze? Any and all? Probably.
Right. And then, I mean, the question is like, how much work do we have to do? How quickly can we get it done with a focused effort? And maybe we hire consultants, whatever. I mean, I have no idea, right? It's just kind of just talking about it. But we don't want people to get in with this kind of, because once they get in, as it says, right, once they get in, we can't change anything. And so not having so much question over the code, that scares me a little bit, you know? So I want to have these definitions in before we get that. I mean, the goal here, we're basically, I've described this before, like there's all this wind coming from the state that says build housing. We got to build a sale that's appropriate. And right now I feel a little unprotected.
Yeah, it's from website updates to redoing the code to all the application materials. There is a huge amount of work that has to be done here. So we've not talked about a moratorium, just, I mean, honestly, it's probably, you would need to do it for at least 3 or 4 months, maybe 6 months, because it's some of these things, there are some quick and dirty things that we done, but some of the broader code changes will take some time. And meanwhile, folks are gonna come through and
they're going to be subject to whatever the legal interpretation is. They're going to be subject to whatever the legal interpretation of the code is based on all the changes that the state has suddenly done to our code.
right, and their whole goal is open up the doors and start building housing.
I get it.
Right, remove every local government control, but there are some of those things. So I don't even know legally. I mean, we'd have to look at it. We could come back and talk to you about the next meeting if that's something council wants to explore.
I mean, I think it's
it would
worth
take some
considering.
time.
Just because I think, I mean, they're going to come through and if they've got this advantage, I'm looking at this as a developer. I mean, I'm going to sue you on every piece of the code that I don't like.
So
Seems
it's
like.
interesting, I'm sorry, but it's interesting, I think, I don't know if the word actuarials belongs here, but where are we gonna be in 20 years after this trash is going through?
Oh, you mean a bunch of garbage projects getting built?
We got to write good code. I mean, that's what it is, right? That's the point, is we got to write good code that builds what we want, that has objective standards, that says, here's what you get to build, and they have to comply by those objective standards as well. There's less loosey-goosiness. We've been needing to do this with our code for a long time. And so the state's forcing us to do it. It's very urgent. It's too fast. I wish that this was coming in and we said, okay, this takes place in 2021. But for this to be Jan 1st, I mean, that's a really heavy lift for small cities, and I think it's a little gross. But I support considering an urgency ordinance so that we can get this right and not have a bunch of these things coming in. I mean, I think it's really important that we that we have a tight code that builds what we want. I mean, that's the thing. We gotta do that because the state has decided this path. I think the housing crisis is real. I think there's good reasons to push cities to build more housing, but we're not ready right now, and we got to get ready quick. And I don't want to have a bunch of projects that are sitting in the wings taking advantage.
So could I ask, I wanted to ask a question. SB 5, that was Wiener's bill, I think. I don't think it passed, but I think they're still working on it. But didn't we dodge a bullet because it was a population of 100,000?
Yeah, it's a 2-year bill, and that's going to be the one that I'm sure the league's going to be very interested in, successful in not getting it adopted this year. But the thing I think Kathy and I have talked about, and that is maybe we come back to the council on the 16th with an urgency ordinance / a review of a moratorium, if that's okay.
Well, I think based on this, conversation with council, our plan is to bring you back. So what we were wanting to bring you tonight was kind of heads up. Here's what we're looking at. This is rather extreme, and what our plan is to bring the ADU. David's already started working on the ADU ordinance to bring that at the second meeting in December and have you look at that as an urgency ordinance. We're looking for some assistance from staff, for some additionals for some contracts, and we've reached out to a few folks just trying to find some folks who could come in and help right away. The broader question, if we could do some kind of moratorium to give us time to really kind of clean this up more comprehensively and not have projects come through, I'd love to understand legally if we can do that.
So in terms of the general plan update, now are we stepping on the toes of that? Are we circumventing the public process and working with the planning commission? Because I had sort of imagined that we would have a public process about the general plan update, and then we would have development code updates flow from that. How does that work together in terms of what you're thinking of needs?
Well, originally, before all this legislation, staff probably saw somewhere between, I'll just call it 10 and 20 kind of changes that needed to be made to the code. Some that were really technical cleanup, clarification, definitely some policy ramifications in that, but within not kind of brand new policy areas per se. So the reality, though, what we're facing now is, you would typically do your full general plan first. That's not where we are. So I think we can look at this potentially as doing what we need to do with the code now, and we then start that broader kind of policy conversation would happen after this. We would do what we need to do, and then we'd start the broader policy, and then if we need to make further changes after that policy direction from council, maybe 2.5 years from now when your full general plan is done, you do those then. So it's not like this is a one and done. This could be, all right, this is really, frankly, some work maybe that should have been done for some time. We do this now. And then we have a broader policy conversation, and you may want to change some other things, and that's all well and good, and they get changed then. But I do think there is, I don't see launching the big vision conversation and doing the broader community outreach. We're going to have to be very strategic and what's the surgeon do? Scalpel. Yeah, a little.
Okay.
Right, yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, and it also seems like if we have this opportunity where we are able to put a moratorium in place when there's serious questions about, if there is anything that comes up that we think is important, we can ask planning commission. We'll have the time because they won't be looking at projects. And that direction can come to council too. The other question that I have for you, David, is the thing that really scares me on the ADUs. The other piece is the 60-day approval. And what's our turnaround time now look like on that? And what if we get 5 ADUs? One day, 5 ADUs show up. I mean, and it's just automatically approved if you don't get it back in 60 days, like whatever it is.
Yeah, there's certainly developers out there that will try to invoke that rite of passage.
Sounds like
the interesting question that I've yet to discuss with council, and that is our current process has 120 days, and that allows for the review of the ADU as a ministerial permit, but then also the building permit is ministerial. So does that 120 days that we have currently until January the 1st get converted to 60 days for both the building permit and the ADU. These are things that scare a lot of jurisdictions, and we're not the only ones in that boat.
I think just it's fair for us to say this, council, again, as you can appreciate, legislation is not always clearly written and not always written by professionals doing the business and doing the work. So it is, some of this language is confusing, it's not clear. And I know David's probably sat in 3 or 4 webinars trying to gather information from different attorneys, League or Goldfarb Lippman, different folks, and it's still a bit of a 3D puzzle. So we're gonna, along with all of our peer cities, have to unpack this a little bit, but having a broader strategy and ability to hit a pause button, we might be well served.
Okay, are there any other questions? I will open it up for public comment.
Yes, hi, good evening, Terry Shore, Greenbelt Alliance. I did send an email to City Council and staff with more details on the subject at hand. So Greenbelt Alliance appreciates the city's review of and attention to the new state housing bills passed by the state of California. The attachment that was provided by Goldfarb and Lippman provides an excellent overview of the new housing bills. In addition, Greenbelt Alliance would like to clarify for the City Council and staff that none of the bills, including SB 330 specifically, contain any provisions that would prevent the City of Sonoma, or any city, from renewing the voter-approved urban growth boundary or creating a new one for 20 years or longer. None of the bills call for expanding beyond existing city boundaries or other long-standing planning boundaries, and in fact requires the reverse. Every bill calls for city-centered growth near jobs, schools, services, and transit that prevent and reduce climate change emissions. Greenbelt Alliance specifically consulted with legislative staff at author Nancy Skinner's office about the City of Sonoma UGB in particular. And I have provided the official response from their office. I previously provided it to the city attorney when that question came up when we were talking about the urban growth boundary. I don't think I have time to read the actual language, which is in the legislation, but the 2 key points are the main intention of SB 330 is to prevent cities from down zoning to prevent housing. So that's number 1. Number 2 is anything, it's particularly an urban growth boundary that has been in place as of January 1 of 2018 remains in place. And I mean, you can read all this, it's legalese language. So I do appreciate that cities moving forward and looking at this in detail. You might want to get an outside consultant like Goldfarb and Lippman to provide some additional details. I would urge you to also look to some of your partners like the League of California Cities and others who are looking at it. Personally, I go to a lot of council meetings all over the county, and I haven't seen any of the other cities that I've been working in taking this up as an urgency or bringing up some of the issues that you're bringing up tonight. So I don't know exactly what that means, whether you have more time or they're behind and you're ahead. So I think that we do need to look at this a bit more, but it doesn't affect the UGB. In fact, this all tells me that we need to get that UGB on track. You can still do it in March, get that done. And one other thing that you said about study sessions, I find that kind of odd as well, because I do work in a lot of cities, and study sessions are standard, and I've never seen any city end study sessions because of planning commissioners' ability to make comments. Seems odd. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If I can just provide a couple of comments to assist in the discussion there. So SB 330 applies to what is considered to be an affected agency or local agency, and so we have to come to terms with what that definition and how it applies or does not apply to the city of Sonoma. So the second thing is what Terry just talked about is probably one of 30 things that SB 330 talks about. It's not the focus of the bill, but it's just one of many things to, again, unpack between now and the end of the year. And we do have the assistance of council working on that as we speak. We started it long before tonight along that journey. The last thing is it was a former planner that turned attorney with Goldfarb and Littman that suggested we do an urgency ordinance. So the same people that that provided you the slides that we provided to you, and also I've talked with folks from BBK, Best BBK, and they're saying the same thing. So when those bright minds tell me that that's probably something we should consider, that's why we talked to Jeff and have him here with us.
Great, thank you.
Includes staff's presentation. We also have a resolution for you to adopt tonight.
All right, do we have a motion or other comments? But hopefully a motion.
Go ahead. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate that you being excited about keeping up with all of this new stuff, and it's a huge avalanche coming this way, and so I'm very thankful that we have you.
Oh, I do. Thank you. Yes, thank you for all that work. I just wanted to say that I support the idea of having a moratorium if that's possible, and I'd like to know more about that. Any other comments or a motion?
Yeah.
Motion?
We'll move to approve the resolution. What do you want me to say?
Is that good? Jeff? No? That's not, is that going to work? The motion was moved to approve the resolution. Is that enough?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Roll call.
Councilmember Agrimonti.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, item 7, council member reports and comments. I have one. Do you know? Go ahead.
I had the mayors and council members legislative committee last Friday, and we basically spent the entire time talking about power shutoffs. It's interesting to hear everyone's experience. One of the ideas that I thought was interesting, which was echoed by a public comment today, was Sebastopol has started this sort of neighborhood kind of like networking, but specifically with the goal of getting parts of the city to identify the people in that part of the city that have special needs or would need somebody to like knock on their door. And they said it was very successful during the evacuations. And so I think that, I don't know, I think it's something we've talked about, doing neighborhood oriented things, and this one, it's interesting to think about. And there are a lot of areas that already do this on their own, so I'm interested in that.
It's like a neighborhood phone tree.
Yeah, phone tree. You just gotta. Everyone should know their neighbors anyway, and you should know who the people are who need a little bit of help.
A report from Sonoma Clean Power. We took a vote of the board of directors last week to ask the staff to investigate looking at municipalization or other public ownership options for power delivery in Sonoma County. So that's happening.
I also had the GSA board today.
Okay, there you go.
It was great.
Can I have my dedication?
Oh, please.
So I dedicated this evening's council meeting to Dominic Gerimoni, and I have information on Donna Gerimoni, a Women's Club member, and I wanted to give that to the city clerk. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? City manager?
Yeah, it's just a few updates. So as council knows in the community, we are on to our next PSPS event on November 20th. So looking at a 4 a.m. on Wednesday through Thursday. Our review of some of the local weather looks like the valley floor will be kind of 25 miles per hour. There is a red flag warning. So as staff, we are preparing again. We're fortunate in the city. This is the same outage for the city as we've had for the last 3 times. So 98% of the city has energy. Unfortunately, I think it's the valley still has significant impacts. So that's a brief update there. In terms of, if council recalls, we did a water rate study, finished that probably about a year ago. And one of the items, what's that? Do you recall hours on the water rate study and many meetings? One of the items we didn't finish there is a sewer connection fee. So that is a piece we are dusting off and we'll be bringing back. Senator Dodd is doing a power shutoff and wildfire safety town hall next Monday, the 25th, from 6 to 7:30 at the Vets Hall, and the public is invited to that. We are looking for a date to reschedule the UGB general plan housing. Would like to do that before the end of the year, so we're working on a date there and we'll see. And I just wanted to thank the Visitors Bureau and the Tourism Improvement District for the funding for the lighting of the plaza, and it was a beautiful night and a lovely event, and the plaza looks beautiful. So with that, concluded. Thank you.
Thank you, City Attorney. All right, on to closed session. The council will be recessing and convening in closed session to consider one item as listed on the agenda. Oh, or is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this? Seeing none, I will close public comment.